Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast special edition show. This show I'm going to make my predictions for each the Stanley Cup and the NBA Finals. We'll talk about the Knicks firing head coach Tom Thibodeau, and then we'll talk some baseball at the end of the show too. All right, we'll start with the Stanley Cup. So the Panthers and the Oilers, again, both teams won their respective series in 5 games. It all begins tonight, 8 o'clock on TNT. Kenny Albert will be on the call with Eddie Olczyk and I'm blanking on the guy's name that's inside the glass. Is it Bryce Salvador? But yeah. Oh, Brian Boucher. Brian Boucher's there now, right? Because he went from ESPN to TNT. So it's kind of like the old NBC group a little bit. So we have a rematch. A series that won 7 last year. Florida was up 3-0. Edmonton won 3 straight and then forced a Game 7. The Florida Panthers won it in 7. So Edmonton is favored in the series, and rightfully so. They have home ice advantage. They have the best player in the series, Connor McDavid. The better coach, I'd say, is Paul Maurice over Chris Knoblauch, only because Maurice won the Stanley Cup last year. Knoblauch is great. Keep banging the drum. I wish the Rangers hired him when they had a chance, and they picked Peter Laviolette over him. And now we're back here. Goalie advantage, I'd say Sergei Bobrovsky. To me, the story of the series is, will Edmonton finally break the Stanley Cup drought, and will Connor McDavid finally have that last piece on his resume? I think this is his best shot yet. Will he get a better shot than this? I don't know, because you never know at the Western Conference. I think that Edmonton has to win this series, more so than Florida. The game line for tonight is Edmonton minus 125, Florida's plus 104 for under 6.5, overs plus 106, unders minus 130. Florida plus 1.5 is minus 250, Oilers minus 1.5 is plus 198. I, for game 1, would go with the over. And I'm trying to find the odds for the series. Edmonton's minus 125 and the Florida's plus 104 for the series. That's literally the same line as game 1, ironically enough. I personally think that it's going to be the same result as last year. It's plus 470, the Panthers in 7. The favorite outcome is Edmonton in 7 at plus 390. Then it's Florida in 7 at plus 470. That's going to be my pick. Florida in 6 is plus 490. And so is Edmonton in 6. Edmonton in 5 is plus 550. Florida in 5 is 7-1. Edmonton sweep is 13-1. Florida sweep is 16-1. I do think Florida's going to win again. They're the better team. They're built for the postseason. Bobrovsky, I think, is more proven as a Stanley Cup winning goalie than Edmonton's goalie. So I do think that Florida, like I said, is better. They're deeper. Yeah, Stuart Skinner's back in net for Edmonton. He had moments last year, but, I don't trust him as much as I trust Sergei Bobrovsky. And Brad Marchand has been an excellent addition for Florida, and I think that is going to make a big difference. And a big loss for Edmonton is Zach Hyman. He's injured. It looks like he won't be back for this series. That is such a big loss. I think that if he was healthy, I probably would have picked Edmonton, because that's how close I think these teams are. But I think could be a series where one injury can flip it one way or another. And Zach Hyman, to me, is that guy where the flip. And Florida's just a machine in the postseason. And I know Edmonton lost game 1 against Dallas and then won 4 straight, which was very impressive by them. And if you ask me who has had a more impressive playoff path, all right, we'll do comp and contrast. So Florida beat Tampa, and then they beat Toronto in 7. And then they beat Carolina in 5. And in Edmonton, they beat the Kings in round 1. They beat Vegas in round 2 in 5 games, which is pretty impressive, and they beat the Stars. I think Edmonton probably had a tougher, on paper, last 2 rounds. And then Florida's path, I think, was a little bit easier. I mean, Carolina, that team is just weird. Toronto's the choke artists, never make the conference finals. And then, obviously, they had Tampa, who's been there, done that team every year, and is in the mix every year, but they haven't made the conference finals since 2022 against the Rangers. So that's a team that's had some turnover and whatnot. So they both have had not easy paths per se, but I think that Edmonton's last 2 rounds were more impressive because of their opponents, and they did them in 5 games. But that said, I think Florida's winning this series. And then my pick for Conn Smythe, I'm going to pick Matt Tkachuk of the Panthers. And what I think is going to be a good Stanley Cup final. I think it's going to go 7. All right, NBA Finals. We have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who just beat the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5 games. And they have the Indiana Pacers, who just beat the New York Knicks in 6 games. Best player in the series, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, all due respect to Tyrese Halliburton, who's just taken his game to another level in these playoffs. Best coach in the series, historically you say Rick Carlisle, but right now it's probably Mark Daniel, who I think is the guy in the league right now. So there's that argument. So that's kind of a wash, but I'd say slight edge to Daniel based on this year. But if you're talking historically, it's Rick Carlisle. And you can make a case that Rick Carlisle's probably done a better job in the postseason than Mark Daniel, only because Carlisle's teams have just been super clutch. Or his team has just been super clutch in these playoffs with all the comebacks they've had. Storyline of the series, to me, is can OKC finish what will go down if they win the title? One of the most impressive seasons in the history of the league, especially in this century. They've just been so dominant, especially on defense, and they have one of the best all-around players in the game in SGA, who they got in, ironically, the Paul George trade. When they sent Paul George to the Clippers and they got SGA and all those picks back. And after they lost to Dallas last year, in the second round, they go and get Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. Hartenstein as a free agent and Caruso as a trade, as they sent Josh Giddey to the Bulls in that deal. And then Indiana is just a really deep team. You could argue they're the deeper team in the series with the bench they have and whatnot. Although OKC's pretty deep too, and OKC cut their rotation. Okay, the pick. I think the series is going to be more competitive than people think. Indiana has shown time in and time again that they can't be slept on and they can't be disrespected. I'm picking the Oklahoma City Thunder in 6 games. Am I respecting the Pacers too much? Maybe. But this is nothing against Oklahoma City why I think it's going to go 6. This is how I feel about Indiana and how much respect I have for them in this run and the run they had last year too. And Rick Carlisle. I think it's disrespectful to pick OKC to sweep. Or even in 5. You could talk me into OKC in 5. It's the favorite outcome. But I think Indiana's going to win 2 games. I do. And they, I think, have the personnel to make OKC earn it. Especially offensively. And this is a big test for OKC's defense. A huge test for OKC's defense. And honestly, this is probably their toughest test yet. Although, you could say that about Denver and Jokic. And that was just a weird fluky series and whatnot. And then Minnesota, they just dominated them. And Minnesota, you could make a case, choked game 4. Or else that series probably goes 6. And that's credit to OKC. And the only lousy game OKC's played all playoffs was game 3 at Minnesota. And that was a primetime ABC game. So I'm saying OKC in 6. Finals MVP, I'm going to go with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Because he's the best guy on the best team. Like I said, I think Indiana has the horses to compete with them. They're deep. OKC's deep. But I think OKC has to experiment with playing guys that they really haven't seen in the playoffs. Like Isaiah Joe's barely played. So yeah, the starting 5s, OKC's obviously SGA, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Lou Dort. But they have Caruso coming off the bench. And I remember they started Caruso in the second half of a game, and that really changed it. And I think that was the Minnesota game 1. So, yeah, the starting 5 on OKC. Yeah, I was right. And obviously, Caruso comes off the bench. Cason Wallace comes off the bench. So, they've been playing 7 guys. But I think they have to experiment, like, although Isaiah Joe was in the game, was perfect from 3 in game 5, I think they need to experiment with him and even Aaron Wiggins. Those are both good players. And then the other Jalen Williams barely saw time too. And Indiana's obviously much deeper. Their starting 5's Halliburton, Turner, Siakam, who I think should not have won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. It obviously should have been Tyrese Halliburton because he hit the big shot in game 1, and he was the best guy in the series, flat out. I don't know why they gave it to Siakam. It was so stupid. No disrespect to Siakam, but, like, I know they're going to say, oh, that's like Jaylen Brown getting Finals MVP last year. Jaylen Brown's a better player than Pascal Siakam. And Jaylen Brown had a better finals than Jason Tatum, although Tatum's best game was when it mattered the most in Game 5 last year. But yeah, Indiana's starting 5 is Halliburton, Siakam, Turner, Nembhard, and Nesmith. Yeah, and then the guys, McConnell's going to have an impact in the series. Mathurin will see time. Will Shepard see some action in the series? We'll see. I think we'll see some Obi Toppin too. So the Pacers have been playing 9 guys in the postseason. But we'll see if OKC goes a little bit deeper and goes to Aaron Wiggins, the other Jalen Williams, and Isaiah Joe. I think they're going to have to go deeper on their bench because of what the Pacers can provide. And this is, like I said, more competitive series than you think. OKC in 6. And MVP is going to be, obviously, the regular season MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then, by the way, the series OKC is minus 750. Indiana's plus 530. And then Finals MVP, Shai's the favorite at minus 550. Tyrese is 7-1. Siakam's 20-1. Halliburton at 7-1 has value if you think Indiana's going to win. And then, yeah, so OKC 4-1 is plus 210. OKC is plus 290. OKC in 6 is plus 440. That's my pick. OKC in 7 is plus 550. Indy in 6 is plus 1120. Pacers in 7 is 12-1. Indy sweep is 50-1. Indy in 5 is 25-1. And let me look at the Conn Smythe odds real quick, because that's what I forgot to look at. The favorite, obviously, is Connor McDavid at minus 105. Sergei is plus 280. Barkov is 6-1. Draisaitl is 8-1. Kachuk to me has the value of 26-1, because if he has a big series, they're going to give it to him, and he's the best player on the Panthers. The reason why I don't think it's going to be Bobrovsky is because I think there's going to be a lot of high-scoring games in this series. I think Edmonton's offense is going to hurt. I think Edmonton's going to be good offensively, but I don't think they're going to win the series. And if Sergei's giving up 3 goals a game in the series and they win, he shouldn't be it. And Matt Kachuk's the best player on this team. How is he 26-1? And Sam Bennett's also 26-1. Marchand's 80-1. But yeah, so Barkov's a good bet at 6-1, but I think it's going to be Kachuk. It's 26-1. I think that's really good value for the NHL. So, yeah, OKC in 6, and then the Panthers in 7 are my picks for the 2 series. Okay, now we're going to talk about the New York Knicks firing head coach Tom Thibodeau. It was announced yesterday afternoon that they are parting ways after 5 seasons. The Knicks fan in me has mixed feelings. Tom Thibodeau's the reason they were brought back to relevancy after being in the abyss for so long. He got so much out of this team in his tenure. And I thought this season was his best coaching job, with the exception of losing Game 1 against Indiana. And I think that game had a big part to do in his firing. And the case against firing him is you went on this great run, the players love you, and the fan base loves you. Who will replace you? But they have to have somebody in mind. I thought Bill Simmons on The Ringer did a fabulous job breaking this down, and Bill's usually spot on. And I criticize Bill when I think he's wrong, but you guys know how I feel about Bill, even though I'm a Knicks fan, and he's a Boston guy. I just think he's wonderful. And he was the one that was literally calling it on his podcast that Thibodeau was in trouble. And he's saying that before the playoffs. I mean, everybody would have fired him if they lost to Detroit, if Brunson doesn't hit that big shot, and if they call foul in Game 4. I mean, maybe that series is weird. And if Boston doesn't blow Games 1 and 2 and they lose and then maybe Tatum doesn't get hurt, if they don't lose those games, but Boston probably wins that series in 5. And maybe Tatum still gets hurt, who knows, but that's probably what they're looking at. Like, oh, Boston collapsed in those 2 games. We collapsed in Game 1 against Indy. But there's reasons to fire him and there's reasons to keep him. So I have mixed feelings about this. And to me, the determination will be the cause of determination will be figured out, like, with who they hire and how it goes and how they fix up the roster a little bit. There's a couple guys that stand out to me. I think Johnny Bryant is probably the best fit. Cleveland assistant, used to be an assistant with the Knicks. He was a finalist for the Suns job. But ironically, Tibbs gets fired shortly after he was announced as a finalist. And then it was announced today that the Suns have hired Jordan Ott, another Cavaliers assistant. But I do like Johnny Bryant, and I think it's time for him to be a coach in this league, and I think he is well respected. So I'd be on board with that hire. Jeff Van Gundy, obviously, is a big name, one of the best coaches in the history of the franchise. Right now, Clippers assistant under Ty Lue, and I think really played a factor in the Clippers' success this season. And then obviously last year Jeff was with the Celtics on Joe Mazzulla's staff. So I would be on board with Jeff Van Gundy, and I think the fan base would be on board with that one too. Although the younger people will probably like, oh, black, like, that's just a name from the past, blah, blah, blah. But I think that would be a good hire, and I think maybe like 3 years ago I would have said that about Jeff Van Gundy, but now I wouldn't, because he helped Joe Mazzulla last year, and he helped Ty Lue this year. So he deserves another chance in the NBA. Mike Malone obviously is available. I think that the reason he got fired with the Nuggets is because he and Calvin Booth weren't getting along, and then they both got axed because of it. So I think Mike Malone deserves another chance. Mike Brown, I just think that's just a retread. There's a reason he got fired in Sacramento. Fired twice in Cleveland. Fired at the Lakers. So I'd pass on Mike Brown. Mike Budenholzer, I just think he has the one shiny thing on his resume is Giannis, and they won the title. And you could say, well, Kevin Durant didn't step on the line. He would have gotten fired that year. And he did a really, really awful job in Phoenix. I thought his best coaching days were with the Hawks, personally. And I thought maybe you could argue his coaching, like the firing in Milwaukee, was premature. But you could say the same thing about Thibodeau. But the reason why they do it prematurely is because then, if you don't, then all the talk is you on the hot seat. And the Knicks dealt with that in the past with Mike Woodson. After that year that they had in 12-13, they lost Indiana in 6, and then that whole season, people were talking about Mike Woodson getting fired, and then he got fired at the end of the year. So the Knicks probably didn't want that again. And listen, they probably see across the Hudson River, the football team, the Giants, they're going to be dealing with that all year at Brian Daboll. Like, you know, James Dolan and Leon Rose and Wes don't want to deal with that. So that's probably why they made the move now. And that's why their co-tenant, the Rangers, moved on from Peter Laviolette now, but I feel like they did that because they knew Mike Sullivan was available and they hired him. So that, I just think, then again, you could argue they fired Laviolette because they knew a 2-time winning Stanley Cup coach was available. Other guys that I think can be in play. So no Budenholzer, no Mike Brown. Michael Malone I'd be fine with. Johnny Bryant is the ideal guy for me, but the heart in me wants Jeff Van Gundy because I've always been a big Jeff Van Gundy fan. Obviously, Jay Wright's name's being thrown out there because of the Brunson and Bridges connection. And Josh Hart. But I don't think Jay Wright wants to go into coaching. Dan Hurley's name's been tossed out there because of the whole thing with the Lakers last year. And that was like the big story going into... I'll never forget, that was the big talking point before the NBA Finals last year. And now this year, it's the Knicks coaching search that's dominated the week of the Finals. So it's kind of ironic that this year and last year, a big market team's head coaching search dominated from a storyline standpoint over the Finals. And then another name I heard thrown out for the Knicks is a guy that's currently coaching, Ime Udoka. Like, why would the Rockets get rid of Ime Udoka? He did a fabulous job with them this year, getting them to the 2 seed, and they're a big fish away from being an NBA championship contender. They are a big fish away, whether that's Giannis. I think Kevin Durant would fit nicely there. Although there's talks about Kevin Durant with the Knicks, which I don't think would be wise. I think the Knicks are better off either keeping the team they currently have together or going for Giannis. But I do think that Kevin Durant with the Rockets isn't a bad idea because I think Phoenix could get a lot back for Durant. And I think Durant, with those young kids, the pressure will be on him, obviously, but I just think the Rockets are a better fit for KD than the Knicks, that's all. But Udoka, I don't know if I'd like an Udoka fit with the Knicks. Quite frankly, he's another Tom Thibodeau. From, like, defensive guy and whatnot. But the case for Ime is that he made the finals with the Celtics a couple years ago and were a hot Steph Curry a game away. He could have been an NBA champion. He could have won the championship that year. And then Steph Curry got hot in Game 4 of that series, and the Celtics were up 2-1 in that series too, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the case for Ime Udoka, but I personally would rather have Mike Malone than Ime Udoka. Only because Mike Malone won a title, Ime Udoka did not. But to me, Johnny Bryant, Jeff Van Gundy, Mike Malone, to me, are my ideal 3 candidates. I wouldn't be that big of a fan of Ime Udoka. To me, he's another Thibodeau, except he actually made a finals. And he'd be still the head coach at Boston if that scandal didn't happen that summer. So there's so what ifs with that, and who knows? Maybe if Ime's still the coach of the Celtics, Joe Mazzulla might be a candidate with the Knicks if Ime was still at Boston. So that's interesting. And Joe Mazzulla, I think's reputation changed with winning the title last year. So it's going to be an interesting hire for the Knicks for sure. Like I said, my 3 finalists would be Johnny Bryant 1, Jeff Van Gundy 2, Mike Malone 3, and I guess Ime 4. And then, I don't know why they're talking about Ime, which is weird. And I want no part of Jason Kidd. There's talks about Jason Kidd, but there's a reason. Oh, wait. He's still coaching the Mavericks. Duh. I don't know why I thought he got fired. Whoops. Yeah, he's still coaching the Mavs. But I think that he wants to stay with Dallas and coach Cooper Flagg. And Jason Kidd's not a bad coach. I just think the fit with the Knicks would be bad. And he made a finals last year. I don't know why they're talking about Jason Kidd and Ime Udoka. Like, those are current coaches with other teams. I mean, I saw some people on X talk about Spoelstra. It'd be funny if Spoelstra did what Pat Riley did, but I mean, the case for Spoelstra is that his teams have not been good since they made the finals, and they traded Jimmy Butler and didn't get a lot back. So that team's probably facing a rebuild. So that's the case for Spo. And I'm surprised it's funny, we're talking about current coaches linked to the Knicks job. Why isn't nobody brought up Doc Rivers? I mean, that I wouldn't want Doc Rivers, but I'm just surprised that his name wasn't brought up. That's all. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But if I had to bet on who's the next coach of the Knicks, I'm going to say it's Johnny Bryant, and that's who I think it should be. Because I think he's earned his chance. And I think he could be the next Kenny Atkinson type of coach. Okay, before we go, let's talk a little baseball. Just want to touch base on the standings. We'll start in the American League East. The Yankees are in first place. They've been the best team in the division all year. They're 37-22, plus 99 run differential, 7-3 in their last 10. They've scored the most runs in the division. Their pitching's been better. The Rays are 6.5 back of them. Plus 45 run differential, also 7-3 in their last 10. Toronto has been surprisingly decent. They're 31-29, but they're negative 10. The Red Sox are 30-34. They just had a walk-off home run. They're plus 13. So the Red Sox have underachieved from a record standpoint, and Toronto has overachieved. Baltimore's been the huge disappointment in the division. They fired Brandon Hyde. There's reports that they might be a seller at the deadline. But my question is, what veterans are they going to sell? I think if the O's should keep their core, like the young guys, like, not that Adley Rutschman's young, but I still could look at him like that. And obviously Gunner's not going anywhere. Jackson Holliday is not going anywhere. Colton Cowser's not going anywhere. But why they're underachieving is sometimes, I mean, I know you could make the small market excuse all the time, but they probably shouldn't have let go of Corbin Burns. They should have extended him. Some of their young guys haven't panned out yet. But their problems are starting pitching. They've given up the most runs in the division. It's funny because they've scored the less amount of runs in the division too. Although they did win last night against Seattle. But Jackson Holliday's hitting .268, so he's been better. Rutschman's been terrible. He's hitting .214. Gunnar Henderson should be better. He's at .262. Ryan O'Hearn's been good for them. Colton Cowser's not been good. Neither's Heston Kjerstad. But yeah, this is about their pitching. And then they almost lost to the White Sox the other day. Charlie Morton's a guy that's going to be traded, I think. And then, obviously, Anthony Santander, big loss in free agency. So, this is the result of bad decisions in the offseason and whatnot, and some of their regular players underperforming, like Rutschman and even Gunnar to some degree. Gunnar should be hitting .300. People were picking him for AL MVP this year over Aaron Judge, which is bogus. So I'm fascinated to see what Baltimore does. Like I said, Charlie Morton's probably going to be traded. There's other guys I think are going to be traded on that team too. I don't think they're going to trade any of the young guys. AL Central, Detroit, who was my pick to win the division before the season. 40-22 in first place there. They have the best record in the American League. They have the same number of losses as the Yankees, but they've played 3 more games than the Yankees. I think the Yankees are a little bit better than Detroit personally. So Detroit has scored a little bit less runs. Their pitching's been better than the Yankees' pitching, but that's Scooble based. Although Fried has been amazing for the Yankees this year. Detroit's run differential is plus 91 compared to the Yankees plus 99. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They're a dominant home team, mediocre on the road, but they're a contender. Minnesota's in second, 33-27, plus 43 run differential. They're 5-5 in their last 10. They've been pretty good. Cleveland's overachieved. They're 32-27. They're minus 17 run differential. KC, 32-29. I think they've underachieved this year so far. They're a minus 4 run differential. Well, some may say that they've overachieved a little bit from a record standpoint, but the Royals should be better than this. Their pitching's really good, but their offense has not been good. Like, they were being picked to win that division before the year, if I'm not mistaken, or could have been picked. Bobby Witt's hitting 287. He should be a little bit better than that. They just called up Jack Caglione, who was their first-round pick last year. We'll see how he does. But it's their offense that's holding them back, so they might not be a playoff team this year, unfortunately. And then the White Sox are a joke, as they always have been since last couple years. 19-42. They're minus 57. They're the worst team in the American League. But ironically enough, Baltimore has a worse run differential, and so does Oakland. I just think that they're the worst because of the record. But the reason why their run differential isn't a disaster compared to Baltimore's, and they have the same run differential as the Angels. And the Angels are 9 games better. And Oakland's is worse than theirs. The reason why their run differential is only minus 57 is because their pitching's been good. And in the AL West, Houston's 33-27 plus 18. They're playing really good. Seattle's a half game back of them. They're plus 4, though. Texas is underachieved. They're 29-32, minus 1 run differential. So maybe there's hope for a turnaround for them. Their offense is stunk. Angels, 28-33. They're minus 57. The reason why their run differential, their pitching stinks. Their offense hasn't been a joke, per se. They've scored more runs than Houston. Oakland's pitching's been a joke. They're 23-39. They have the worst run differential in the American League. They're 1-9 in their last 10, losers of 8 straight. The National League, the Mets are in first. They're 38-23. So they have pretty much have the same record as the Yankees, except they've played 2 more games. They're a plus 67 run differential. They're 8-2 in their last 10. That's in spite of all the drama that Juan Soto was causing of late. And they're just not good on the road. So that's a Mets problem. And they've only scored 269 runs. Their pitching's been outstanding. Phillies are a half game back. They're 37-23. They're plus 27. 500, though, in their last 10. Their pitching has not been as good as it usually is. The Nats are only 28-32, so they're not a disaster, but they're minus 42, so you could argue they've overachieved. Their pitching's been bad. Their offense has been not a disaster. Atlanta's 27-32. They're 10 back. They're just kind of getting back like Acuna, and so maybe they'll be a little better. Strider got lit up last night. They're plus 8. They have a good run differential, so they're probably the 3rd best team in that division. But they're 3-7 in their last 10. Marlins are a minus 83 run differential. They're 23-37. Cubs are in first in the NL Central. They have a better record than the Mets. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they have a plus 102 run differential. Do they have the best run differential in the league? Yes, they do. Them and then the Yankees are second. So the Cubs have scored a lot of runs, and their pitching's been really good too. But yeah, they're a contender. And Craig Counsell, year 2, is looking good. St. Louis has overachieved this year. They're 33-27, 5 back of the Cubs. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They lost back-to-back, though. Milwaukee's 34-29. They're plus 25. They're 9-1 in their last 10. They're playing good baseball. The Reds with Francona 30-33. They're plus 23. So they're better than their record. And then Pittsburgh's 22-39, minus 61 run differential. Their offense has been one of the worst in the game, if not the worst. They've scored the least amount of runs, them and the Rockies. There's a lot of talk about Paul Skeens and whether they should trade him or not. I don't think they should. I remember the people were having the same conversations about Jose Fernandez with the Marlins a decade ago, whether they should trade him or not. And obviously, his passing was so tragic. And that's the most tragic thing. I can remember something happening from a sports standpoint since I've been following sports. But, yeah, the same conversations were happening with Jose Fernandez 10 years ago. And now it's happening with Skeens. I think they should keep Skeens and try to hit on some more draft picks offensively. And then Dodgers are in first in the West, 37-24. The Yankees have a better record than them, so do the Mets. They're plus 80. They're 500 in the last 10, though. I think that with the New York teams coming to town, I feel like they stepped their game up. Obviously, the walk-off win last night against the Mets. The dominant win over the Yankees. Isn't it like 17-2 they beat them on May 31st? 18-2. And then the Yankees beat them on Sunday Night Baseball. The Mets beat them on Monday. And then the Dodgers had the walk-off last night. But that was a really good Dodgers win. But the Dodgers haven't been the ho-hum. We're the best team. Dodgers. I mean, they've had some injuries and stuff, especially pitching-wise. Their offense has been the best in baseball. They've scored the most runs, and then the Cubs, and then the Yankees. But their pitching hasn't been good. San Diego's one game back of the Dodgers. They're 35-24. They're plus 18. They're 7-3 in their last 10. The Giants got off to that great start. Now they're only 33-28. They're 4 games back of the Dodgers. Plus 40 run differential. Their run differential's good, but they're 3-7 in their last 10. Diamondbacks 7 in disappointment. 29-31. Minus 5 run differential, 3-7 in their last 10. And then the Rockies finally won their first series of the year against the Marlins. They're 12-50. They're this year's White Sox. Although the White Sox are probably this year's White Sox from like a big market standpoint. But Colorado's this year's White Sox. They're minus 181 run differential. Their pitching stinks. Their offense stinks. And I wonder if they're going to finally trade Chris Bryant to somewhere else. Like a team that could use him. But he's probably on the injured list. Kyle Freeland has value. I think they can trade him. They'll probably keep Brian McMahon. Orlando Arcia, I could see somebody trading for him. Defensive whiz at shortstop. So, there you have it for the baseball standings. I'm going to try to record next week one day. But Friday, I'm going to have Jeff Burns on to do the Belmont. So stay tuned for that. And then Monday, I'm probably going to record and talk about where things stand in the NBA and the Stanley Cup Finals after 2 games of each. And then maybe we'll do an activity or something. And I obviously want to start getting into like off-season predictions in both the NBA and the NHL. Who's going to get traded and to where. So keep an eye on for that. So hope you guys have a great night, everyone.